Thank you for being with us in the study. We're in Revelation chapter 20. John has seen two big things so far. He has seen in a picture the truth that the devil's been utterly and absolutely defeated with reference to Rome. What picture was that? The binding of the devil in a chain, dropping him in a hole, putting on the lid, sealing it up with the seal of God for 1 long 1,000 years. Then he saw a second truth told by a picture. What was it? The saints, living or dead, are perfectly triumphant over the devil with regard to his use of Rome. How did he see that truth presented in picture? What picture told the truth of the perfect triumph of the saints over the devil, whether they were living or whether they've been persecuted to death? What picture was it? It's the living sitting on thrones, and the martyrs for Christ rising from the dead and joining them on thrones and reigning with Christ for 1,000 years. Only the holy and the blessed partake of that resurrection, which John is specific enough to say is the first resurrection. Now, he hasn't told any literal truths yet. That is, he hasn't yet in chapter 20 told any truths couched in literal terms. He's been telling truths by picture. The next truth he tells by picture is that the devil, though he has been defeated in Rome and flawlessly defeated, will have another shot at the saints somewhere, sometime, through someone. And God wants the saints to know, I don't care what he does, I'll whip him for you. And verses 7 through 10 tells us that when the 1,000 years is finished, why wait till the 1,000 years is finished? Because if you break into the 1,000 years before the 1,000 years is finished, you've ruined the figure. You must let the 1,000-year time figure run to its conclusion in order for it to act as a figure of completeness and utterness and totality, you see. So you don't interfere with the 1,000-year time figure. At the end of the 1,000 years, that is, I've told you one truth now, by a 1,000-year time figure, the devil's utterly defeated with regard to Rome. That's one truth. Wrap that up. Now he tells them another truth. The devil will have another shot at you sometime, somewhere, and I don't care when, for I'm ready. He tells that truth, that the devil will have another shot. But here's the important truth. He tells them he'll have another shot, but I will utterly defeat him without any reservation. He tells that truth in 7 through 10 in another picture. What is it? The devil's let loose out of his prison in 7. He goes forth and gets Gog and Magog. He gets them together. They number the sand of the sea. They went up over the breadth of the earth. They compassed the beloved city. That's the New Jerusalem. Fire comes down out of heaven and destroys them. And the devil that deceived them is thrown into the lake of fire and brimstone. Here the Lord is saying, I'll utterly, totally, without reservation, under any circumstances, I will utterly bring him to defeat. Who's this Gog and Magog? It comes from Ezekiel chapters 38 and 39. It's an ideal army. If you were in on our study in Ezekiel 38 and 39, here's what you heard. God's going to deliver them from their Babylonian and other national subjugation. They're in their tombs. God's going to restore them under David, he said. Going to bring them back into the land flowing with milk and honey and superabundant, he said. He's going to give them national dignity again and going to give them unity, he said. And somebody said, yeah, we had all that before. We had David as our king. We had a land flowing with milk and honey. We did have national unity. And then look what happened. If it wasn't a Philistine that hit us, it was an Egyptian. If it wasn't an Egyptian, it was an Assyrian. If it wasn't an Assyrian, it was a Babylonian. It was always somebody. They took it away from us. How do we know that the future is secure? And how does God tell them that under the Messiah the future is secure? He calls an army called Gog and the followers, Magog. He calls them. They're an army, as we saw from chapter 39, on an utterly conservative estimate of 630 million. And he wipes them out just like that. That was his way of saying in Ezekiel 38 and 39, your future is altogether secure. Your enemies can't win against you under the Messiah. You see 27 through 10? The very same thing. There's a particular difficulty here for premillenarians. They say that Gog is destroyed. Gog and Magog are utterly annihilated prior to the millennium. This is after the millennium. Where do these multiplied millions of the ungodly come from to fight against God's people after the millennium? Where do they come from? This is especially difficult. This is especially difficult for people like Lindsay and Walford. For Lindsay and Walford are both Calvinists, you see. And the millennium begins with no one but righteous people. So they can't fall away. And they're being ruled over by Jesus Christ, the flawless ruler. Everybody's got what he needs. And there's no devil, for he's bound for the 1,000 years. Would you tell me then, where do these multiplied millions of unbelievers come from? Hard to explain, isn't it? Anyway, as far as you and I are concerned, chapter 20, 7 through 10 tells us, your future is secure. So what have we heard so far in chapter 20? The devil's utterly defeated in his use of Rome. How was that told? He's thrown in the pit, having been bound, and he's sealed up for 1,000 years. The second thing we heard in chapter 20 was that the righteous are wholly victorious over Rome, whether they live or die. How was that truth told to us? The martyrs rise to join their companions on thrones, and they rule with Christ 1,000 years, and the priests also. The third thing we were told in chapter 20 is your future is secure. How are they told their future is secure? They got another picture. The devil let loose, him getting an army that nobody could count, them coming up against the city, and the Lord beating their brains in. And the devil thrown in the lake of fire. We've one more thing to see in chapter 20. And what's that? It's the second resurrection. It's the second resurrection. Now, this is very tempting, I know, but don't do it. Don't do it. It's very tempting to make chapter 20, 11 through 15, a prediction of the final, historical judgment. Don't do that. You know what we've done throughout Revelation? We've said, that's what he sees, what does it mean? That's what he sees, what does it mean? That's what he sees, what does it mean? We get to chapter 20 in the first 3 verses. That's what he sees, what does it mean? 4 through 6, that's what he sees, what does it mean? 7 through 10, that's what he sees, what does it mean? 11 through 15, that's what he sees, and that's what it means. That won't do. The first resurrection in 4 through 6 is a vision. It tells truths. It tells a central truth. It's not a literal resurrection. It's not a historical event. It doesn't happen in objective reality. It happens only in the vision. That first resurrection was no more a literal resurrection than the resurrection in Ezekiel 37. I think we'd be foolish to make the second resurrection a literal resurrection in objective reality. Then we would be sent to the premillenarian. And this is not the only reason, you understand, but we say to the premillenarian, be consistent. Make it all figurative or all literal. And that's bad advice anyway, you understand. But we'd want him to be consistent, and then we would go to 11 through 15, and we'd make that literal in the middle of all of this figurative stuff. And then we'd go on in chapter 21 with a new heaven and new earth, and we'd make that figurative again. The only piece we want to take as historical and objective in this life is verses 11 through 15. That won't do. No. This is the second resurrection. Who's it for? It's for the rest of the dead. In verse 5, the rest of the dead live not again, until the 1,000 years should be finished. You see? Now, the second resurrection is 20, 11 through 15. It's telling a truth also. What truth is it telling? Well, the first resurrection told a truth about saints. What does it say? They are perfectly victorious in Christ. What does 20, 11 through 15 say? The worshippers of the beast are perfect losers. The first resurrection teaches the righteous die in hope and in victory. The second resurrection says the servants of the beast die in hopelessness. The first resurrection says the righteous die to live and reign with Christ. The second resurrection says the servants of the beast die and live again only to die again. That's what's called the second death. That's why it's called the second death. Both of these parties suffered in the vision, in the apocalypse, you see. Both of these parties suffered a first death. Both of them did. One for Jesus, the other for the devil. In the apocalyptic picture, both suffered a first death. But those who are first resurrected in the vision, over them, the second death has no power. But over those who serve the beast, the second death does have power. And they're thrown into the lake of fire. Verse 14. Now the lake of fire is a symbol of utter and hopeless defeat and despair. It's the apocalyptic way of describing total judgment by God. Someone says, well, that would mean the final judgment. No. If you read, and I'm not lying to you, this is very common in the prophets. Read the prophets for yourself. And one in particular keeps leaping to my mind all the time it happens. In 34 of Isaiah, the judgment on Edom is described in these very terms. In fact, do you remember Daniel chapter 7? If you were with us in Daniel chapter 7, 9 through 12. We saw there the judgment of the fourth beast. The books were open. The judgment was set. The fire and all was there. And the fourth beast, Rome, was taken, judged, and thrown in the fire. That's the judgment here. It's an apocalyptic judgment. It's not speaking of an historical, objective reality. It's a vision that's telling a truth. What truth? When you die outside of Christ, when you die in the service of the beast, you die hopelessly. You die and live in the apocalyptic picture only to die again. That's 2011 through 15. I want you to notice verse 11. I saw a great white throne, and him that sat upon it, from whose face the earth and the heaven fled away. That's the first earth, the first heaven. That's the world that was dominated by the oppressor. That was the ungodly man's world. The first one passes away. Now then, in 11 through 15, we read about the judgment of the rest of the dead. The rest of the dead are the servants of the beast. They're checked out. The books are opened in 12. They're checked out. And since their name, if their name, verse 15, is not found written in the book of life, he goes into the lake of fire. Now the book of life is for those who serve the Christ. The book of life is for those who belong to Jesus. And if your name's not in the book of life, you go into the fire. These folks don't belong to Christ. The book of life is checked. Is so-and-so's name there? No. Into the fire. I want my name to be written there. Here's the fundamental issue. It's not, are you a good talker? Are you rich? Are you well married? Have you good kids and all of that? It's, is your name written there? One day the apostolic group came back to Christ. They were absolutely ecstatic. They'd been out on the limited commission. They'd healed all kinds of diseases and they'd preached. And they preached well. They said even the demons are subject to us. He said, I'm glad. But don't rejoice in that. Rejoice that your names are written in heaven. I don't care if you're a preacher, an elder, a deacon, or whoever you are. Sister, I don't care if you're the most beautiful girl that walks the streets. I don't care if you're the most educated woman in the neighborhood. I don't care if your business is fine and everybody thinks you're wonderful. The real issue is your name written in the book of life? Chapter 21 talks about a new environment for the people of God. I saw a new heaven and a new earth. The first heaven and the first earth are passed away, and the sea is no more. What's the sea in Revelation 13? That's where the Roman beast came up out of. You see? That's gone. Rome's rising no more. Okay? What's this new heaven and new earth? In the book of Isaiah, you have new things. That's new expressions of God's providence on behalf of His people. You have a new song. That's a song embodying those new things that God has done. You have a new name. That's a new status, a new entering into a new relationship with God. A new heavens and a new earth is a new environment for the people of God. You see, the language of judgment is this. God dismantles apocalyptically. God dismantles the ungodly man's world. Isaiah 13. Isaiah 34. Jeremiah chapter 4. Micah chapter 1. Zephaniah chapter 1. In all of these passages, and many more than I've got the time to share with you, you find God dismantling the ungodly man's world. He rolls up his heaven as a scroll. He blacks out his sun. He makes the mountains to run like wax at his presence. He will say in Jeremiah, the earth was without form and void. The ungodly Judeans got it there, you see. And so the ungodly man's world is attacked. But listen, this is very important. If the language of judgment, apocalyptically and prophetically speaking, if the language of judgment is the dismantling and the destruction of the ungodly man's world, what's the language of blessing? The making of a new one. In the book of Isaiah 65, the Master talks about making a new heaven and a new earth for God's people. He tells them, the old things have passed away. The former troubles are forgotten. This is Isaiah 65, and you read it for yourself. Will you do that? Begin reading about verse 10. He says, the former troubles are hidden from mine eyes. The old things, this is Isaiah 65. The old things are passed away. Behold, I make all things new. Rejoice forever in that which I create. For behold, I create a new heavens and a new earth. Rejoice in what I create. For I create Jerusalem a rejoicing and her people a joy. He gives them a new world to live in. He's just dismantled the ungodly man's world. It's been judged. All the seas are turned to blood. All the fountains are turned to blood. The sun's blotted out. The whole earth has all been burned up and the vegetation is shot. That's the old world. That's the ungodly man's world. That world's taken out of the way and a new one comes in. The new heavens and the new earth is a new environment for the people of God. A world free from the oppressor. It's not a literal new world, of course, because the ungodly man's world wasn't literally destroyed. Apocalyptically described, it's annihilated. But nothing literal about that. Read for yourself Isaiah 13, that the fall of Babylon, the whole world was dismantled. Read Isaiah 34, at the judgment of Edom. He said, I'll roll up the heavens like a scroll. I'll make all the stars fade away as a tree shaking off unripe figs, another piece will say. So, the ungodly man's world is not literally destroyed. So, a new heaven and a new earth is not literally made. Oh, no. The world of the oppressor had a sea out of which the beast came. But that sea was turned to blood. The drinking water was turned to blood. The vegetation was destroyed. Everything was turned upside down. And God just takes it right out of the way. If that's the language of judgment, what's the language of blessing? A new heavens and a new earth with no oppressor there. All things have become new. In verse 2, he sees the holy city, New Jerusalem. The holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven, made ready as a bride for a husband. Now he saw the holy city coming down. So where's John standing? On the earth, on the new earth. John's on the new earth looking up, and he sees the New Jerusalem coming down. There's its heavenly origin. There's its heavenly origin. These are the kingdoms come out of the earth. This one is heavenly in origin. What is the New Jerusalem? It's the bride of the Lamb. That's the church. That's the wife of Christ. That's the New Jerusalem. They just come through the ringer. How are they coming out? All smoke-covered, bloody, battered, and beaten? No, sir. Pure and white like a bride adorned for her husband. Look at her. Beautiful. God said, I'm your God. Verse 4, He'll wipe away tears from their eyes. Death will be no more. Neither shall there be mourning, nor crying, nor pain anymore. Read for yourself. Just read for yourself. Hosea 13:14. Isaiah 26, verse 19. Notice up in chapter 20 and in verse 13 that death and Hades are taken. They're two enemies in the apocalyptic book. They're taken and thrown into the lake of fire. Death is defeated. Christ is the victor over death. They don't have to worry about death anymore. He wipes away tears from their eyes. All of this now comes from the books of Isaiah, the books of Hosea, etc., etc. Now then, We're getting to have to move just a little bit more quickly, okay? Here we go. Verse 6. All these things that come to pass, I'm the Alpha and Omega. I'll give you, if you're thirsty, of the fountain of water of life freely. The overcomer will inherit these things. Now I'll be his God and he'll be my son, and on it goes. He says the fearful, verse 8, the fearful are going to have their part. That's the fellow who will not stand up and be Christ during the time of pressure, who apostatizes and runs off, you see, to serve Rome. In verse 9, one of the 7 angels says to him in 9, the last phrase, come and I'll show you the bride, the wife of the Lamb. What's he going to show him? The bride, the wife of the Lamb. What is the bride, the wife of the Lamb? It's the church of God. What does he show him? He shows him a city 4 square, verses 10, all the way through chapter 22 and verse 5. What's he going to show him? Verse 9, last phrase. Come and I'll show you the bride, the wife of the Lamb. He takes him to a mountain in verse 10, and he shows him the holy city Jerusalem. What is the holy city Jerusalem? It's the bride, the wife of the Lamb. What's that? It's the church. You know it's the church, and I know it's the church. This city 4 square that he goes on to describe, what's he describing? The church, not heaven. Oh, I know that hurts. I know. He said, let me show you the bride, the wife of the Lamb. He shows them the new Jerusalem. He describes it as a city 4 square with golden streets, jasper walls, everything fine. It's the glorified church. It's the church triumphant. It's the church painted in all of the beautiful ways it can be painted. It comes from the Old Testament. Let's finish Revelation next time. Thank you.